I think one of the opportunities in this is we've learned some, either let down some boundaries because it didn't have an impact on the outcome, or we're now saying, hey, these are values that were very clear to us as important now that we've gone through a year of COVID, right?
But also now you have an entire year's worth of students, freshmen, that maybe didn't learn that the typical way you would teach that during orientation or just being on campus with other students. I think about athletic teams. They didn't have the same type of interactions as normal. So there needs to be grace probably this year where you expect sophomores to know those boundaries and the values and what you expect on campus. And there's going to need to be kind of a re-education potentially.
Hi, welcome to Cap and Gown. I'm Matt Boisvert, and I'm excited today to cover some very important conversations on the hunger for community. This is a session that Rachel and I did 3-4 weeks before the world shut down at spring break last year. And so we were talking about the role of community and how to reinforce community. And then we sent all of our students home. And here we are in 2021. And as we're bringing students back to our campus, we need to cover this topic again. So again, thank you for joining me. I am joined today by Shawna Neal. And Shawna, we have, as we talk around this, Rachel will be joining us from that first session. We have clips from her. But Shawna, let me introduce Shawna. First of all, Shawna, you are head of client relations and for Pharos Resources, and you are joining me on this Cap and Gown.
Hello, everybody. Happy to be here.
So we normally do this with our guest, Anthony Melchiori. We ask some questions and learn some things about him. And I want everyone joining us to learn a little bit about you. So my first question is pretty simple. Do you like pickles?
My answer is not simple. Sometimes. You know, if it's like on a Chick-fil-A sandwich where they force it, like I'm not going to request no pickles, then sure, I'll eat them. But I don't just like grab a pickle and eat it.
Okay. All right. If you could have any superpower, which one would you pick?
Flying, for sure.
Flying. Great. And then I love this question, would you rather have to fight one bear-sized duck or 10 duck-sized bears?
10 duck-sized bears, because I feel like you could kick them.
Bears are scary though. I don't know about that.
I don't know. They're little. They'd probably be cute.
Well, I need to give a shout out to everyone who is joining us, and Michelle, great to see you join us, and our friend Sherry Woosley, Dr. Woosley, thank you for joining us. That is my not 20 questions, Shawna, that is 3 questions. So let's go back to our topic and this issue of the hunger for real community. And as we've talked about over this year, I mean, we think about everything that's happened. There was a need for community in the over 15 months ago. Then with COVID, we started to see a lot of fracture in community. And as we've talked about with our theme of Kintsugi, in that we've learned a lot about community, and we've been really creative in ways to form community. But we also need to come back and be reminded about some of the, I guess, the essence of community and some of the things that just historically have been lost. This for us is we're really passionate about it because we're all about community and relational retention, and we understand the power of connection. And so when we have everything that we've done around communities and crafted into our technology is how do we bring people together? And as we're going through this and hopefully there's going to be this new normal that our schools are able to start being intentional about what they build. Let me go first with the overall state of the union, and then I'll talk about the hunger for community and the art of community. but I want to cover some of what's going on right now. So the first one is kind of fun. Colleges are starting to line up, according to Inside Higher Ed, Emma Whitford. Colleges are starting to line up to accept Bitcoin and cryptocurrency donations. As we've seen, you might have seen in the news, Bitcoin's fallen. It had a rough month. It's down 36%, but overall, it's been great. So the University of Pennsylvania has announced that it received $5 million worth of Bitcoin. And so some other schools like Puget Sound, 7 years ago, an alum gifted $10,000 in Bitcoin to the school. So this is a thing. Now, back in 2015, one of our clients announced that, and I think they were the first school in the United States to accept Bitcoin as payment for tuition.
Wow.
And back then in 2015, Bitcoin was worth $300 a coin, and 300 US dollars. Today, it's worth 120 times that, even with the recent decline. So a $20,000 tuition back in 2015, if you paid it all in Bitcoin, that Bitcoin today is worth $2.4 million.
It's crazy.
All right. Well, anyway, if you have Bitcoin or if
GameStop stock, AMC stock, how about those?
We're not, this is not financial advice either, but you might have some alum who are looking to avoid capital gains tax and would be happy to send you some Bitcoin. Second article, we've talked about this before, about the transition away from standardized testing. Now in the state of Washington, every public school in the state of Washington, they are no longer requiring the SAT or ACT. So again, Puget Sound University is on that list. And they continue to talk about the barriers that exist by requiring standardized tests. So now University of Washington is saying we want a holistic review of our students and not just the GPA and test scores. And so, but one thing that they noted is just over the years, they've noted that SAT's value has become weaker and weaker at predicting a first-year student's performance. So this was a change that was long overdue, quite frankly. Okay. Next, we've also talked about vaccination news and universities that are requiring it. So we have a list of all the schools that are requiring vaccinations. This is interesting, coming from Indiana, a red state. Indiana University is now requiring the vaccine. All 90,000 students across 9 campuses will be required. And so that's kind of interesting because it's one of the first institutions in a predominantly conservative state. So we see that as an ongoing trend. I'd be curious for all of you joining us, if your school has made a decision yet, if you would chat to us or just send us a chat. We'd love to hear what's going on at your institution. I'm sad about the next article, and I think it's really important for us to start thinking about. So this comes from a survey that Cengage did, where nearly 50% of graduates feel unqualified for entry-level jobs. And so if you think about those who just graduated and their experience in their senior year, how they closed their junior year, they weren't able to do internships, many of them. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity for our schools to invest this year in reinforcing career readiness and really promoting internships. And my guess is, Shawna, that parents will be looking for those institutions that can really highlight that. So,
yeah, what amazing stories they'll have though once they're able to get in, hopefully with some good companies and some good bosses and everything, to have really great first experiences that they can hopefully full circle come back and help students just feel more ready to, or just be a part of the alumni network and helping some seniors.
Absolutely. Well, the last one, I don't know about you all, this definitely is affecting me. This is an article that just came out, published in Inside Higher Ed, Health Habits Emerging from the COVID Crush. And what it was emphasizing, now I didn't really think about this, but the number of steps not taken walking across the college campus. And so thousands of steps every day that a college student typically would make, moving from class to class or this building to this building. And so a lot of students over this past year did not block off time to take care of themselves physically. And that definitely has had an effect on them mentally. So 44% of students report getting less physical exercise than before the pandemic, with loss of motivation being the primary reason identified for a third of the group. 45% have fallen into less structured eating routines, and 38% say they had regularly missed meals. And I think, again, coming back to building community on your campus and literally hunger for a community, this ties right into that, just being thoughtful. The number of students who had not had a wellness checkup in the last year is more than half of those who responded. So what we're looking at is just as you're bringing students back onto your campus, an opportunity here for building community and healthy habits. There's a lot of things that you could do just to help your students, being able to provide some outlets for them and ways for them to get together and have community, but also be healthy. So eating, exercising, all of those have an impact on our mental well-being. And I know that personally. So
For sure.
that is my state of the union. So with that, Shawna, I want to get back into our topic and talking about the hunger for community. I want to go through, so again, we'll pull from several things that we had talked about back in February of 2020. And so
Feels like a lifetime ago.
it really does. No, I mean, so much has happened.
So much.
First, this comes from the American College Health Association. So before COVID, this was the state of our students. 64% said they were feeling very lonely. I wonder what that number is today. 62% said they had overwhelming anxiety. I wonder what that number is today. 69% described their current state as very sad, and 53% were saying they just felt hopeless. And I think that we saw that play out over the last year and a half with our students. So again, that's a concern. When you look at now, this is an update where we're looking at 40% are struggling with mental health or substance abuse, and you can see the number of these are college students who are feeling a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, have turned to substance abuse, and 11% who have seriously considered suicide. So again, we need to be very intentional about how we're then building this community for our students, knowing this was the state before everything with COVID. And you were saying, I mean, if just take time to think about all that's happened and how culture was interrupted over the last year.
Yeah, I mean, campuses have spent so much time building that sense of community, the culture. Whenever you step on campus, this is what you can expect. This is how students interact. This is how students interact with faculty. You just have this whole culture that campuses have created. And then COVID totally interrupted that. Everyone had a completely new way of, whether it was online learning or learning but with masks on. I mean, every campus has had just kind of this weird combination that they've had to do. And so now as we move forward, whether students are required to be vaccinated or masks, whatever that's going to look like on your campus now, there has been that interruption, but it's not staying, right? We need to move back into, how do we create that sense of belonging and that community, and how do we get that culture back? And you and I were talking about some of the social anxiety that comes with that as well, where there is fear now being around other people for some students, that you can't just require them to interact a certain way anymore. There has to be space for all different types of interactions and feelings that students have, whether there's that social anxiety or the students that, like me, would be just in your face, excited to talk, like kind of the extrovert versus introvert. There's just so many different types of interactions that are going to be happening now, which I think are going to be really great, but there has to be kind of a new space for different types of interactions as well.
Absolutely. So let's just take a little tour, a walk through memory lane. What's happened in America? This is going back to, the 1940s and what community used to be like and where we are today with our students. So we first introduced this again over a year and a half ago, and it's changed even more, exactly as you said. So in the beginning, if you think about America with the front porch and how we interacted with our neighbors all the time, they would come over, we would sit out and we would just catch up on the front porch. And then you have homes built today with most homes, or a lot of homes, don't even have a front porch anymore. And in fact, you drive up in your driveway, you open your garage, you pull in, you close the garage before you get out of your cars. So just in case a neighbor saw you, you don't have to talk to them. The cocooning in America is real. And this again was happening. When you think about, I don't know, my grandparents used to write letters to all their friends, and so you had great penmanship and it was exciting to get that letter in the mail. And today, when we're talking about the mail, it's just full of junk and Amazon, right? And so there is definitely has been this move away from the personal. Now, what's interesting is last week we were talking about how there are college presidents who decided to really invest in being personal, and that's had a huge impact on their enrollment and what this next year's incoming class looks like. So I think there's an opportunity to reconnect with students using some of these old school things. Think about how far the telephone has come. So when the telephone first came into my mom's house, it was a share group line. And so you would have to make sure that your neighbors were not on the phone, and you'd have to, be given the ability to make a call, and someone made the call for you. And now our phone isn't a phone so much anymore. It really runs everything that we do. Big transition there. And we used to, I don't know if you ever, Shawna, did you ever have one of these?
I mean, my parents had one growing up, but once I went into college, I didn't.
It was one of those novelties of, I could actually know who's calling, right? And so the ability to know who's calling, to see the number, decide whether or not you want to answer that or send it to the voicemail.
Yeah.
And now we're just pretty quick. I don't know, out of all the phone calls I get in a day, pretty often hitting decline. Also seems like most of the calls today are spam. So, but that's just where we are. So if you
one
think
of your 3 questions for me should have been, do I know a single other person's phone number if it's not programmed in my phone?
Well, that's a good.
The answer to that would have been no.
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, right. We don't even bother with that. So think about now, when you first got on the internet, did you have AOL?
Sure did. That was the it thing.
Yeah. So the evolution, we go to phones. Now we're going to online. Now, when we look at our email, it's a lot of spam. Back then, it used to be really neat to get an email. You'd maybe get a couple in a week.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's mostly spam. And then, we also had the instant chat of AOL Instant Messenger. Was this your life too?
Yes, this is what I meant by the it thing, was, having your special name, your code name that your friends would know and jumping on. Spent many hours on AOL Messenger.
That was your form of community, right? Now, our students are on TikTok. A lot of times it's not even a direct message. It's just hoping that you get some traction with the things that you post. And we're going to, have videos and hopefully I get a lot of likes. And there's a lot of data on social anxiety from that just waiting to see if what you uploaded was something
Yeah.
that your friends responded to.
I feel like people are basing their worth off of how many likes their video gets,
Yeah,
which is dangerous.
it would be for me, you know.
Same.
So yeah, I'm just not that interesting. So then you think about chats. So again, community and how we communicate, and so not text messages, messaging with our friends, and have in the past we used to have real conversations. Today it's kind of more like this. This is my conversations with, I think, my kids these days. So it's just evolving in how we're connecting. And if you look at like Instagram, again, what we're sharing, we're trying to carve out, this is who I am and this is my life, and my lifestyle. And I think what's sad is what is being taken out of that picture of, no, here's really where you are. There are other people around you. Be present with those around you. And so all of that, I think, is that walk through where we are and how, yes, at each stage and every year, I'm sure when we had front porches, it wasn't the best community, and sometimes the people would come over you wouldn't want to talk to for very long, I'm sure. But so it wasn't always rosy. But where we are today, I think, is increasingly isolated is the point there. And so with that, I think that there's a lot that we can reflect on, be thoughtful of, and consider when we're thinking about our students, their emotional needs, the issue of sense of belonging, when a lot of times it's just they're seeing themselves as isolated, and just went through a year and a half of a lot more isolation than we ever could have imagined or designed for. So I want to start an introduction to some of the content that Rachel shared with us back in the original presentation on the hunger for community. And so then we'll play these, and then Shawna and I will come back in. And if you have any questions as we do this, please chat to us. We'd love to respond, or if you have any feedback, love to share that with everyone else.
In that progression that Matt's just gone over, where we start with visits on the front porch and we end up with our reality projection of what's happening in our life, what I think has happened, which with each step, and this comes from a book called Real American Ethics, strongly recommend that you read that, is that we are gaining control over how we connect with other people. We don't have to be there when it gets painful. We don't have to be there when they're going through something difficult. Instead of being in the same place and us looking at each other and forming real community, what we're doing instead is we're finding ways to reduce social friction. And I think this is a really powerful thing as we're talking about our students hungering for community. We have to teach them the language of a reduction of social friction. Because what happens when you do that is you fray our relationships. In fact, Borgman would say that unplanned encounters with strangers are one of the ways that our texture of society is kept intact. As we meet people that we aren't necessarily connected to, as we walk through our campuses, as we go to the cafeteria and eat with new people, that bumping into each other as we're in different places in our lives is really important to building that community. And our students are not good at that. We have to be really disciplined to try to build those kinds of relationships in for them, because it's so easy to be insulated from other people. I think part of the language that we have to teach our students also comes from this idea that our friendships are a virtue. They are a discipline that we practice every day. You have to learn how to be part of a community, and you do that by practicing it, and then you have to maintain it. And I would say, as I think about being an adult, this is a place where I really have to be disciplined. It's easy, as Matt said, for me to drive home into my garage and go in my house and be on Facebook or check Instagram and then watch television. And if I'm not disciplined about being connected to other people, because that's how you live a good life, then that's a skill that you can totally dissolve and not have access to anymore. So I think as we're talking about this hunger, part of the piece of that is that students have substituted junk food community for real community. They've found community in places that are easy for them, in places that they can leave without a lot of loss. They haven't been taught how to really be part of the fabric of community, which means you show up for other people when it's hard. You figure out how to solve conflicts. And the reason they're so isolated and lonely is because they've taken this lesser thing of community, this junk food, this sort of empty calories of community, instead of a thing that's harder to pursue, a thing that's harder to show up in, and that is a real community with real people who are really struggling. And so we have to be able to teach community. We have to be able to deliver that to our students and to walk with them as they're acquiring the skill or the virtue of community and friendship, and then also building that and maintaining it as well. So lots of hunger on campuses for this piece of community. And like I said, I think talking about it in terms of trying to reduce social friction and junk food community is really helpful for our students to be able to grasp what that is.
Shawna, I love that. And thinking about when we're just our own assessment of, are we disciplined? Do we practice and model how to be a part of community? I think that's also going to be hard for us as we're going back into a normal routine on campus. So the first part is we need to be disciplined. We need to demonstrate or model community. But I would also encourage for everyone joining us to think about what are those things that, as Rachel described it, junk food community, what are those examples of that right now, things that we're doing that would just be considered junk food? Is it TikTok? Is it, I don't know if it's Instagram. Do you have any examples there, Shawna, of other examples of junk food that maybe we just take for granted and we do because it doesn't cost a lot?
Well, yeah, I think everything that you said are great examples. And if we think about it in the context of what she was saying, it's easy to be insulated from people. In the context of COVID, it was way more easier. Or I don't even know if that's the right phrasing there, but just we had masks. It was expected to do communication virtually rather than face to face. And so having that extra layer of insulation there. So exactly what you're saying, all of that, the junk food, all of the different social media aspects. Social media just exploded, right? Of all of the different platforms there are now for people to communicate that way.
If you think about Zoom as it, so have we taken on the best practices of Zoom and how we build community, or are we leaning kind of toward junk food there? I think one thing, as we've talked about with Kintsugi, is that there's a lot of good that we've learned about how we can virtually maintain community, but when it gets to the place where it's again it's not real community. It's like what she said about being, the fabric of community, showing up even when it's hard. A lot of times, that's hard to do. In Zoom, you can just moving on. I got to go. So,
but if you think about, so as she was speaking, I was just thinking, if we're using Kintsugi theory here of going, all right, this broke. What can we take now to piece it together and make it better? Just thinking about how fun it would be to have a professor, if I was big on TikTok, to have a professor create an account, create goofy videos, to just feel connected to him in that way. So whenever I go into class, I have just a relationship of seeing him be kind of this goofy guy outside of the classroom.
Real
That
person.
would be a really fun way to engage and have community, as long as it doesn't stop there, right? As long as I don't only know him via TikTok, but I just see this like goofy other side of a professor. There's just a lot of ways that we can use the things that we learned during COVID of how to engage each other offline,
I would
online, but off
I would
person.
be very interested to see if any of our attendees, if the president of your institution, or if someone on your team has a TikTok account where they're doing that.
Yeah.
So
Mason Conklin, right? He showed us during our conference a couple weeks ago all the great ways that he engages with faculty, all of his creative ways. I guess he needs to create a TikTok now.
that would be awesome. Come on, Mason.
Come on,
All right,
Mason.
well, let's move forward with just breaking down the art of community.
So let's move on now to the art of community. This is really what you all do. This is teaching people how to be in community. And there's lots of different components to this. I'm going to give you a really brief overview of this book that's called The Art of Community. If you have not read it, I would strongly encourage it. It really just gives you a layout of here is how you build community in any sort of area. So it can be in our schools, it could be in churches, it could be in your neighborhood. But Vogue has really come down to some very specific things that you have to have in order to provide this art or culture of community for anyone on your campus. So I'm going to give you a really broad overview. And I would just be thinking as I'm going through each of these things, where do you see this on your campus? Is that something that you do really well? Or is that something that you could invest more in and think a little bit more about how to make that powerful? So I'm going to start with boundaries. Boundaries is basically how you decide that somebody is in or out of your community. You usually have a testing period. So on our campuses, this would be kind of like visit day where people come and they try to decide whether they want to be in or out. And what you're doing in boundaries is you're teaching people your values and you're defining those values as a community. Here is what is important to us. Here's what we believe. I think a great example of this boundary is the residence life meeting that takes place during the first week of school, where we say, okay, you're now part of us and here are our values. Here's what we're going to do. Here's kind of the behavior that we expect for you. So you have a progression usually into your community. You might start off as a prospective community member, a prospective student, and then you're accepted, and then you move into a current student. And you're defining all the time in those boundaries, what does it take to be in? And for all of our schools, that's going to look different. A community college is going to have different boundary expectations than a small liberal arts college, than Harvard. We're all defining the ways that we decide somebody is in or out of our boundaries. And you want to be very articulate about those boundaries so that people are not confused about whether or not they're in or out. So boundaries, values, and enforcement.
So I think it's interesting as we're talking about, so one boundary in the past has been ACT and SAT, right? And so saying to perspectives, like, we're not going to use that as an in-out boundary line. We're going to consider you on the whole you, not just your high school GPA or your standardized. But I think that there's a lot to unpack in that. As you think about your institution and what the boundary lines are, as Rachel said, it's different by every institution. And certainly, across the schools that we serve, there's a lot of different boundaries. I think one of the opportunities in this is we've learned either let down some boundaries because it didn't have an impact on the outcome, or we're now saying, hey, these are values that were very clear to us as important now that we've gone through a year of COVID, right?
But also now you have an entire year's worth of students, freshmen, that maybe didn't learn that the typical way you would teach that during orientation or just being on campus with other students. I think about athletic teams. They didn't have the same type of interactions as normal. So there needs to be grace probably this year where you expect sophomores to know those boundaries and the values and what you expect on campus. And there's going to need to be kind of a re-education potentially.
Oh, Shawna, just thinking about like a volleyball team, you played volleyball as a freshman coming in. If you came in and not only were you redshirted, but you had to do all the distancing and wear a mask. And I don't know if you were redshirt, if you were allowed to participate in much this past year, but that would be really hard. And then the coach's expectations of, no, you've been a part of the team all this time.
Right.
But for those freshmen, they haven't really. So was there a clear boundary of in, out for your volleyball team?
Yeah, for sure. It's hard with sports because it's like you come in as a freshman and you're on the team as you're identified on campus, right? People are like, oh, you're a volleyball player, but you don't really feel that way yet as an incoming freshman. There's just all of the relationships you have to build, and the upperclassmen really have to accept you, and you really have to learn kind of the boundaries and where you fit on the team. So like you're saying, even with this past year being very different, then there was a whole new set of rules that even the returning players had to kind of learn and adjust. And so I think sports is really an interesting change that happened with COVID. And I'm curious this year kind of what that switch looks like for teams that are coming back and hoping for a new normal.
So I think that really moves really well into the next one, which is this initiation and thinking about, so for your athletes or other organizations, I mean, if you think about for a freshman, what they normally, how they should be initiated in, even starting with welcome week and transition, some of those challenges. So let's listen to Rachel talk about initiation.
The next piece is your initiation. So if you think about that, this is your transition of people into your community. And usually we think about things in higher ed, like a letter of acceptance, that would be your initiation. Hey, we've now invited you in. Welcome week is initiation. We have all of these things that we do. And once you've gone through these things, then you are fully part of us. Or you think about opening convocation. You have stepped over the line because you have now done this initiation. You have become part of our community. And with the community becomes, you get new privileges. So you get your ID card, you get to live in the res hall, you get to attend classes. How you're describing or articulating to your community this initiation before you step over the line and after you step over the line is a really powerful piece of making sure that they feel like they belong to your community. I would also say that a lot of our students have a belonging crisis, which means they're not sure that they're part of us. And the nice thing about this initiation or even an invitation to be part of us is that the invitation itself can become evidence of them belonging to your community. They feel invited in. And it can be to a social event, or it can be to a club, or it can be a one-on-one invitation, but it tells a strong story for those students who might feel uncertain about whether they're allowed in your community or whether they actually belong. So thinking through how you initiate your students into a community is really a powerful piece of that art of community.
So thinking about this belonging crisis right now, and Dr. Woosley's talked with Rachel about sense of belonging, but right now, if there was a belonging crisis in the past, it's even greater today. And then we used to have a graphic that showed, for your juniors, here's what their experience was, and your sophomores, here's what their experience was. So being very intentional about re-inviting not just your freshmen into initiation, but re-inviting sophomores and juniors and even your seniors into that is going to be really important. And, just an invitation is a great reinforcement. No, you do belong here. I was thinking about majors, and I used to teach in marketing in a college of business, and it was always great to have the new freshmen come in, and but for a lot of our sophomores and juniors, they haven't really been close to their faculty, and as they've gotten into their major, they've been distant. And so there's a real opportunity for whatever major, whether if it's business or if it's pre-nursing or English, just to invite your students into that community because they've been distant from faculty for so long. For a lot of our students, they've been having to do it, on Zoom and not able to do office hours and all of that. So just that idea of a belonging crisis that's 2.0 this year.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what I was thinking about too, is that it doesn't necessarily have to be a full campus big thing, like overwhelming, what are we going to do? But there's so many different pockets of communities and groups and teams and everything on your campus that can really do even a better job than just an institution as a whole, tying students in and doing that initiation process. So there's lots of capabilities there.
So the next one Rachel talks about is rituals. And I think this year, new rituals are going to be important in bringing students back into existing long-time traditional rituals.
The next one is ritual. So thinking about both your formal and your informal rituals. You think about on your campus, how you celebrate birthdays. That's a pretty informal ritual. But you might have some formal rituals where you say, now that you're part of our community, we do these kinds of things. I know for my second grader, it's the 100 days of school. They have some rituals and some celebrations of that. On our college campuses, you think about a candlelight devotional where we welcome our freshmen in the first week of class, or you might have some other rituals on your campus. The important thing about this is that this is a community display. So you want to be thinking about the places on your campus where you reveal the community to itself, where you say, look at all of the other people who are connected to you, who are participating in this. This then provides a scale and a strength of this part of the community that you are part of and that you have responsibilities for. In the book, it talks about best form of rituals. These are things like making sure you welcome people and you explain the intention of the ritual, and then you talk about what's going to happen. But all of you on your campuses have these rituals, and to be able to examine those and see how they help draw our students into community is a really powerful part of what we're doing in that art.
Well, I think about some of the formal and informal rituals in my undergrad, and a lot of those just thinking about the opening ceremony, right, Shawna? So at my alma mater, the opening ceremony was a parade of flags where everyone celebrated all the places that all of the students come in from, and it was an incredible event. And for freshmen, especially for our international students, it was a huge event, thinking about how we can invite them back in and have those. So exactly as Rachel said, welcoming them, how we talk about the intention, the drawing into this is an important community that you're a part of. Another school of ours does Tinker Day, where the president just cancels classes for everybody. The students have no idea which day it will be. And then when everything's shut down, everyone dresses up and they climb a mountain and they spend the day together in community. And I love Tinker Day. I'm curious what our schools will start doing to not only maybe bring some of their formal rituals back, but maybe it's time to start thinking of some new ones. So for those of you who are joining us on the Zoom, if you have some formal rituals that you love that your campus missed out on this last year, share those with us. So, and especially if you have new rituals that you're planning, this is going to be a very important part of how you connect with your students and show them that this whole process, that they are a part of something unique, and it will give them stories forever.
Love Tinker Day too, as you're talking about mentally being affected, emotionally being affected. I mean, we're getting exercise, we're getting community, we're getting a break just mentally from classes. That's a really great one that if you have a mountain to climb near your campus, you should implement for sure.
Absolutely. As Rachel Elam has posted, if you would like a copy of the book that we're going through, The Art of Community, just chat us and we have some copies that we'd love to mail to you. Okay, so the next one is about temple. and unpacking kind of the places where community comes together.
The next thing I'm going to move on to, I think you'll understand really well, and that's the idea of temple. This is just where you practice community, where you tell stories, where you celebrate successes. Every place can kind of become sacred for a short amount of time. So it may be that in your chapel, you have some practices of community, but it might also be that around a dining table in your res hall, you may have some sacred practices or ways that you connect to that.
So I think, as Rachel said, it's pretty straightforward with temple. A lot of times students will tell you where community happens. I think about, so yes, res halls, intramural fields was a place where community happened, and that had its own set of rituals. And as students came together and they cheered on their team, obviously there's temples around athletics on a campus, but as she also mentioned, res halls, you remember we had some presenters at our Bridging the Gap conference talk about their team coming together into the dining hall and how they sat together and they showed community, for their students. And I think that there's a real opportunity there. If you all joining us, I would love to hear more about your areas on campus. What are those places on campus that reflect community? They are your temples on your campus. Let's move to the next one.
And then the second to last I want to talk about is stories. This is the idea that you are telling others about your values. You're teaching factual and emotional truths about your community. It's a way for you to share where you came from, how you've overcome difficult challenges, and sharing things like personal stories. So most of us in our orientation, we have this idea where we say, you're now joining a community and we have this long historical significance. And here are ways that we as a community have overcome our challenges. And so finding ways and places that you're telling those stories is really important for teaching your students how to be part of a community.
I love this part. And one of the best examples I've ever heard is Southwest Airlines. And they have an incredible hiring practice and big part of their storytelling. As you go walk through their corporate offices, their walls are filled with pictures and a little narrative about what that picture means to the founder of the company. So a lot of our schools, I think about one of the schools that work with, they had in stairwells, they had the stairwell stories where they had these are big experiences that we want you to be a part of. This is where you can go do study abroad, and we want you to participate in these organizations, and they're sharing that. But also as you walk up the stairs, they had pictures of graduates and current students who had internships and then full-time jobs, and they told the story about being a part of this college. This is your network, and this is what you can look forward to, and gave students a vision for who they could become. And I think that there's a lot of storytelling. If nothing else this summer, if you just sat down and said, what are a couple of things that were highlights from this past year, things that our students did or our staff did that, students need to know, freshmen need to know, sophomores need to know they're a part of this. What are some of those stories that you can share that would bring your community closer together? And I'll say this, Shawna, while I love storytelling and I love the collection of stories, ask your students, find out, what was going on with them, who supported them the most over the past year. Yeah. It's also helpful just to have some of those stories about, hey, this was not easy. This was, remember in the beginning when we talked about community, and it's like finding those hard parts of community. I think a part of storytelling this past year is, let's not pretend like that Instagram photo that it's just this piece. Right. Let's zoom out and have the full picture of everything that was happening and be real with our students so that they can see hey, these are faculty and staff that I can connect with.
Yeah. And what a great place to partner with admissions also, because they're the storytellers on your campus, right? Of telling incoming students all of the awesome things that they should expect. So tying in the stories that they're telling, making sure that that's what students are truly experiencing and how that they're being a part of community. And then exactly what you're saying, let's make it real. Let's not just tell the picture perfect, here's where you come whenever you're 100% mentally healthy and emotionally healthy and have your life together. Hey, come as you are. Let's do community together. This is part of normal life and we're building something beautiful, because last year sucked for a lot of people and it's okay.
Yes, and that's okay to just say. All right, here's the last piece.
Symbols are also really important. These are reminders. We talk about formal and informal tokens that are going to help you remember something significant. In fact, Matt and I were just talking about this idea of symbols. Do you want to say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're working with schools to provide a success coin. And the idea is that when you have a student who was referred through our system, an early alert was sent in, and that student overcame a significant challenge or was able to pass their class, that they would be given a success coin. And from that then becomes a symbol, a reminder to them that they can accomplish things. When they're in struggle, they can be reminded, looking at that coin, that this has happened in the past and they've been successful. And also that your office is a great partner for them in whatever struggle they're in.
So when you're giving that symbol, thinking about being able to clearly say to your students, this is why you are getting this signal, this symbol. This is what it represents to me. This is why I'm giving it to you. And then also connecting it to their future, saying, I'm giving you this symbol because I think it will support you or it will service you in some way in the future. So a tangible connection to their experience in your community.
Another example of that is for your students who are in the process of deciding a major. When they choose a major, is there a symbol, a thing, tangible evidence that you can give to them that would represent that process that they've gone through, the validation of their fit in that major, and then to encourage them as they pursue that and remind them that they've been successful through that process. So I also love symbols. I think tangible evidence of accomplishing a thing, reaching through a difficult stage is really important. One of our friends and partners at an institution, one symbol that she was ready to get rid of was the mask. She said, I would like to have a throw it in the trash can ceremony. So that was one getting rid of a symbol. But I don't know, Shawna, if you think about what are some creative things that we could do where we can provide students with that reminder. You've gone through hard things.
Yeah.
This last year was hard in a lot of different ways. Maybe this is something that your counseling services can put together, and for the students that they had to see virtually, they can now, when those students come back on campus, give them something that reminds that student they've accomplished a lot. So as I said, not just for students who have gone through challenges with their mental health, but also deciding on a major and how important that is. And so how do you reward students as they go through that? Or a student who got a red light on their stoplight survey, and yet they are now successful. So a lot of ways that you can build those in, different symbols. It's an important piece. And I think when we look back at our college experience, there's I've held on to a lot. I think I've said in the past that one of those symbols for me resides in my wallet. It's a quarter from one of my professors who said, hey, I want you to know that I care. And this is from Vince Swinney. He gave me this quarter when I was a junior. And he said, if you ever need to call someone, here's a quarter, back when it cost a quarter and I didn't have a cell phone, my number, and I want you to know that I care. And so I think symbols matter. And so being intentional, they don't have to be big, but something as a reminder is really important.
Yeah, we've had a couple as athletes. I played volleyball at Abilene Christian University, and after playing for 2 years, you would get a Bible that had ACU's logo on it and then your name engraved on it, which was always like, oh, I've made it. I've done 2 years. And then if you complete your 4 years playing, or whatever your eligibility was, you got a ring
Wow.
that had your sport engraved and the years that you played on it. And so the other thing that, like, during graduation, you have, if you're cord for honors or like different groups you were in and things like that. So I wonder if there's like a COVID, you survived the COVID year type cord or something that all students could have attached
I
to their
love that.
graduation cap and gown would be nice.
Our sophomores, juniors, and seniors, not, again, not just for our freshmen, but being intentional for all of them. So it's great. Okay. So speaking of freshmen or sophomore, juniors, and seniors, moving forward into the inner ring, I want Rachel to talk more about this.
The last one I'll say, and this is about moving into the inner ring of community. So this is really about a maturation process. You think about students coming in as freshmen and they're learning your community and they're getting connected. And then maybe they want to be an RA and they have to have certain maturity to be able to do that. And then maybe they want to be in student government, and then maybe they want to be a TA. Inner rings is a way that we continue to move people closer to the heart of community. By giving them sort of evaluations of, here's how you show up for other people, here's how you connect to other people, here's how you'll be present for other people. And we evaluate that process and move them into these inner rings.
Again, I think that being intentional about moving them forward into the inner ring, one way that your school will have great community this year is, again, being able to invite the students who have experienced the past few years with you. Your seniors are going to be very important in so listening to them, whether they're the members of the student government, for all of your teaching assistants, your RAs and RDs, there's going to be a lot of insight that comes from them, and giving them that role of being in the inner ring. You've been a part of us for all this time, and you know what is the strong points of our community. You know what brings people together, and encouraging them, incentivizing them, or giving them the opportunity to lead is going to be not only great for them and their student development, but also for your campus. So that I think is a really important part of this last piece as you move people through the art of community. And I guess again, just to close, we've had a difficult year, and there's been a lot that has happened on your campus. And so taking time over this summer to be intentional about building community, following these 7 different stages, pieces of principles of community will strengthen your campus and lead to great student outcomes. So Shawna, thank you so much for joining me today on Capping Down, this Capping Gown, and we will look forward to everyone joining us next week, Tuesday, 2:00 Central. There are definitely ways we'd love for you to stay connected with us. If you have not yet, there's all these ways. Just scan this QR code, find us on LinkedIn. If you are listening to us on YouTube or on the podcast, you can also be a part of our Zoom community. And so join us with that. And also all of our podcasts are on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and Anchor, of course. So thanks, Shawna.
Thanks for having me. This was fun. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a great day.